African American as the behavior, and then you get the nigger behavior, you know, and that's the behavior that Mike Tyson has around his entourage, and it scares people away. There's no class. And I also want to clear up a little statement that people are repeating around about niggers, okay? When I made the comment about Mike Tyson, okay, they asked me, what you think about Mike?
When a man who never backed down from anyone finally admits there were 3 fighters who tested him like no others, you know those names carry weight. Héctor Camacho, the flashy showman with curl-toed shoes and sequined gladiator skirts, named 3 specific opponents as the toughest challenges of his legendary career: Edwin Rosario, Ray Mancini, and Julio Cesar Chavez. Each one forced the Macho Man to face a different kind of hell inside that ring. But why these 3? What made them so special that Camacho, a fighter who built his reputation on being untouchable, openly admitted they pushed him to his absolute limits? Before we dive into the battles that defined Camacho's toughness, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and hit that bell so you never miss our breakdowns of boxing's most intense rivalries. To understand why these 3 fighters stood out, you need to know what Camacho was before he met them. In the early 1980s, Héctor Camacho was not just a defensive wizard, he was an offensive dynamo who moved at a speed most opponents could not comprehend. He blended the classic New York and boxing school with raw, explosive athleticism. His footwork allowed him to fight from angles that confused orthodox fighters. Early victories against Rafael Limon and Jose Luis Ramirez showed a man willing to stay in the pocket and trade punches, confident his reflexes would let him land 3 shots for every one he took. In those years, Camacho's toughness was rarely tested because his evasion was absolute. He simply was not there to be hit. The Macho Time persona was more than marketing. His ring entrances lasted longer than some rounds. He would dance, pose, and seize control of the event before throwing a single punch. This was psychological warfare. By delaying the violence with costumes and routines, Camacho asserted dominance over the arena itself. For his Puerto Rican and New Yorkan supporters, it was a celebration of identity. For traditionalists, it was disrespectful showboating. This polarization would become crucial in later fights, where the crowd itself turned into an adversary. Then came June 13, 1986. Madison Square Garden, a fight billed as Friday the 13th Resurrection. This was not just a title fight. This was a civil war within Puerto Rican boxing. Héctor Camacho from Bayamon versus Edwin Rosario from Toa Baja, 2 towns just 15 minutes apart. Camacho represented the flashy, Americanized diaspora. Rosario represented the traditional hard style of the island interior. The narrative going in suggested Camacho would outbox the slower Rosario with ease. Camacho entered undefeated at 28-0 as the WBC lightweight champion. Rosario was 28-1, seen as dangerous but manageable. The reality of what happened would fundamentally alter everything about Camacho's career. The first 4 rounds followed the script. Camacho used superior speed to potshot Rosario, moving, jabbing, staying out of danger. Then came the 5th round. Rosario, cutting off the ring, landed a short, explosive left hook flush on Camacho's jaw. This was not just any punch. Rosario was a renowned power puncher who would later be cited by Julio Cesar Chavez as the hardest hitter he ever faced. That left hook buckled Camacho's knees. His legs turned to jelly. For the first time in his career, the invincible Macho Man was visibly hurt and in immediate existential danger. Camacho did not go down, but he was forced to hold and survive for the rest of the round. Prior to this moment, Camacho believed his speed made him untouchable. Rosario's hook proved that speed could be timed. The psychological shock of being hurt by a fellow countryman in front of a divided Madison Square Garden crowd introduced the element of fear into Camacho's equation. This was the moment everything changed. Speed-based fighters rely on balance. When that balance gets disrupted by concussive force, they usually crumble. But Camacho's ability to hold and spin while his equilibrium was compromised showed an elite survival instinct. This was not panic. This was a programmed defensive response kicking in under catastrophic system failure. After regaining some control in the middle rounds through careful boxing, Camacho faced another crisis in the 11th. Rosario tagged him again with a massive right hand that nearly finished him. Hurt and dazed, facing a finisher with an 85% knockout ratio, Camacho found the mental strength to override his instinct to brawl. He used the clinch, lateral movement, and defensive holding to reach the final bell. The crowd chanted Chapo in support of the challenger. The split decision victory for Camacho was highly controversial, with scores of 115 to 113, 115 to 113, and 113 to 114 for Rosario. But the victory preserved his undefeated record and title. More importantly, it proved Camacho had a survival gear, a level of toughness that allowed him to function while neurologically compromised. The deep insight from the Rosario fight is that it traumatized Camacho into becoming a better technician, but a less exciting fighter. The accumulation of punches and the shock of Rosario's power convinced him that trading in the pocket was a fool's game. Following June 13, 1986, the Macho style shifted from offensive flurry to defensive preservation. Camacho effectively decided that if he could win by avoiding punches, why should he risk getting hit? This shift, while criticized by fans who wanted blood, allowed him to extend his career well into his 40s. The toughness displayed against Rosario was intellectual. He recognized his mortality and adapted his entire methodology to protect it. Rosario was the toughest because he was the only man to make Camacho fear the exchange. He hit Camacho so hard that the Macho Man boxed differently for the rest of his life. 3 years later, on March 6, 1989, Camacho faced a different kind of test against Ray Boom Boom Mancini. This fight for the inaugural WBO light welterweight title was framed as a glorious comeback for Mancini, the beloved Italian-American brawler who had been retired for 4 years after losing to Livingston Bramble. The fight took place at the Lawler Event Center in Reno, Nevada. This was Mancini country. The atmosphere was overwhelmingly hostile toward Camacho. He was not just fighting an opponent, he was fighting the narrative of the event itself. He was cast as the villain in Mancini's redemption story, the slick, arrogant foil to Mancini's blue-collar hero image. Camacho's entrance remains one of the most iconic moments of his career. He walked to the ring dressed in a red matador hat with ear-like protuberances and gold sequined trunks, overskirt, and shoes. Sports Illustrated described the look as a cross between Midas and Mickey Mouse. This costume was deliberate provocation. By entering the ring in such outlandish attire amid a chorus of boos, Camacho signaled his absolute refusal to be intimidated by the gravity of the moment or the hostility of the crowd. It was a psychological assertion. You may hate me, but you cannot ignore me, and you cannot touch me. Mancini represented the archetypal pressure fighter, relentless, forward-moving, willing to eat jabs to land body shots. For Camacho, who had adopted his safety-first style after Rosario, this was the ultimate test of his new philosophy. Could he keep a relentless pressure fighter off him for 12 rounds without engaging in a brawl? The fight followed a clear pattern. Mancini chased. Camacho circled. Camacho peppered away with his right jab, using movement to frustrate Mancini. While Mancini landed hard, overhand rights and body shots, they lacked precision. Camacho's toughness here was demonstrated through discipline. Despite the crowd's jeers and Mancini's goading to stand and fight, Camacho stuck to his game plan. Mancini's toughness was legendary. He was a fighter who had been through the tragic Duke Koo Kim fight and had never been truly chased out of a ring. Yet Camacho managed to neutralize this aggression, not with power but with geometry. He constantly turned Mancini, denying him the planted feet necessary to deliver his boom-boom power. For Camacho to outmove and outjab Mancini in rounds 11 and 12 showed supreme cardiovascular conditioning. He did not just survive Mancini, he outworked him in bursts. The Mickey Mouse outfit masked an athlete of Olympic-level fitness who could dance for 36 minutes under high-intensity pressure. The split decision victory for Camacho, with scores of 115 to 113, 115 to 113, and 112 to 116 for Mancini, enraged the crowd. They threw coins and debris into the ring. Mancini felt he had pressed the fight and deserved the win based on aggression. However, expert analysis favored Camacho's clean punching and ring generalship. Mancini was tough not because he hurt Camacho the way Rosario did, but because he forced Camacho to work for every second of every round. It was an exhausting 36-minute sprint. Camacho later admitted it was not pretty, but he got the job done. This victory validated his post-Rosario style against a world-class brawler. It proved he could defuse a dangerous bomb like Mancini through sheer skill and movement. The toughness was in the refusal to crack under the pressure of the event and the aggression of the opponent. If you're enjoying this breakdown of Camacho's toughest battles, drop a comment below and let us know which of these 3 fights you think tested him the most. Then came September 12, 1992. The fight billed as ultimate glory. If Rosario was the stylistic turning point and Mancini was the mental test, Julio Cesar Chavez was the physical crucible. The bout took place on Mexican Independence Day weekend, turning the Thomas and Mack Center into a cauldron of Mexican nationalism. The rivalry between Mexico and Puerto Rico is the fiercest in boxing, and Chavez was at the peak of his powers. An undefeated, relentless machine with a record of 81-0. The fight had been building for 4 years, originally scheduled for 1991, but delayed due to Camacho's personal and legal issues. By the time they met, Camacho was viewed by many as past it, a fighter who would run until he was caught. Understanding the positive angle on a fight Camacho lost decisively requires nuanced understanding of boxing valor. The scores were 120 to 107, 119 to 110, and 117 to 111, all for Chavez. But the victory for Camacho in this fight was not on the scorecards. It was in his refusal to fall. Chavez known as perhaps the greatest body puncher in history, relentlessly targeted Camacho's ribs and midsection. Reports indicate that by round 3, Camacho was forced to abandon his lateral movement and clinch as Chavez cut off the ring with surgical precision. The body attack was systematic. Chavez doubled up on hooks, going to the head and then digging to the body. This is the type of attack that dismantles a fighter's legs. By the 8th round, Camacho's left eye was badly swollen and he was cut near the right eye. He was absorbing considerable punishment. But here's the most significant data point from this fight. There were no knockdowns. Despite eating flush left hooks and overhand rights from an 81-0 legend for 36 minutes, Camacho remained upright. The crowd chanted "Duro Duro," which means hard, hard, urging Chavez to finish the job. They witnessed something unexpected: Camacho's refusal to quit. In the 9th and 12th rounds, when his legs had deserted him, Camacho stood toe-to-toe with Chavez. He could not run, so he fought. This forced engagement revealed a granite chin that few knew the Macho Man possessed. Body shots sapped the legs. For Camacho to remain standing in round 12 after absorbing 11 rounds of Chavez's bodywork indicated an abdominal tenacity that contradicted his soft public image. He took the kind of punishment that makes fighters quit on their stools, yet he answered the bell for the 12th round to ensure he finished the fight. This was a moral victory of the highest order. The Chavez fight paradoxically salvaged Camacho's reputation among hardcore boxing fans. For years, critics had called him a runner after the Rosario fight. Against Chavez, when running was no longer an option, Camacho stood his ground and took his beating like a warrior. Chavez himself, who had shown zero respect for Camacho prior to the fight, acknowledged the Puerto Rican's toughness afterward. The crowd, which had screamed for Camacho's blood, witnessed a display of grit that transcended the macho caricature. This fight proved Camacho was not just flash. He was made of iron. He absorbed the best shots of the greatest Mexican fighter of all time and finished on his feet. Looking at these 3 fights together reveals a clear narrative of resilience and evolution. The Rosario fight taught Camacho he was mortal. It stripped away the illusion of invincibility and replaced it with prudence. The Mancini fight showed that this new prudence could still defeat championship-level aggression. It was proof of concept for his second prime. The Chavez fight demonstrated that beneath the prudence lay a foundation of bedrock toughness. When the defensive wizardry failed, the fighter remained. The central insight here is what we might call the macho paradox. Héctor Camacho built a brand on being untouchable, yet his legacy is defined by the moments he was touched. He listed Rosario, Chavez, and Mancini as his toughest opponents, not because they were the biggest paydays, though they were, but because they stripped him of his avatar. Against them, he could not just be Macho Time, he had to be Héctor. In all 3 instances, he displayed a specific boxing virtue: adaptability. He adapted to Rosario's power by boxing carefully. He adapted to Mancini's pressure by using the ring. He adapted to Chavez's dominance by simply refusing to yield his consciousness. The most compelling positive narrative is that Héctor Camacho was one of the most intellectually and physically durable fighters of his generation. While the sequins in the Macho Time slogan suggested superficiality, his performances against Rosario, Mancini, and Chavez reveal a depth of character often overlooked. He fought the hardest puncher in Rosario, the most relentless brawler in Mancini, and the greatest icon in Chavez of his era. In 36 rounds of combat against these 3 titans, he was never knocked out. He won 2 of the 3 encounters and finished the 3rd on his feet. Rosario forced him to grow up. That left hook in the 5th round shattered the illusion and birthed a more cautious, survival-oriented fighter. Mancini forced him to focus. The hostile environment and relentless pressure required absolute discipline and mental strength. Chavez forced him to endure. The body assault and sustained punishment proved his chin was granite and his heart unbreakable. This trifecta of opposition stands as testament to a fighter who, despite his flamboyant exterior, possessed the heart of a Spartan. The macho persona was not a mask to hide weakness. It was a banner under which a warrior fought. The positive narrative derived from these 3 brutal contests is one of evolutionary survival. Camacho proved he could adapt his style to overcome power, utilize his intellect to neutralize aggression, and summon superhuman grit to survive an irresistible force. These 3 names, Rosario, Mancini, and Chavez, represent the trinity of toughness that defined Camacho's evolution from flashy offensive fighter to defensive master to proven warrior. What made these fighters so tough was not just their skills or power. It was what they forced Camacho to confront within himself. Rosario made him confront mortality. Mancini made him confront his discipline under hostile conditions. Chavez made him confront the limits of his physical endurance. Each battle revealed a different layer of toughness beneath the sequins and showmanship. Each victory or valiant effort added another chapter to the legend of a man who refused to be broken. So if you enjoyed this deep dive into the three fighters who tested Héctor Camacho like no others, make sure to subscribe and drop a comment about which fight you think was his toughest test. Was it the traumatic power of Rosario, the mental grind against Mancini, or the brutal endurance test with Chavez? Let us know what you think.